Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, black in. Again, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I got to make this quick. Don't have a choice. So you're lucky today. And I want to start by thanking Selector for coming on yesterday and for what he taught me. Some things I suspected and he confirmed. Some things few things I knew, but he confirmed again. And there were some things that I did not know, and he taught me. And for all of these things, thank you. I mean that from the bottom of my black heart and the depth of my black mind. So, let me point this out right quick. What I picked up was this. In the States, when I was coming up, and he and I we are less than a decade, roughly half a decade apart in age. So I was unaware of how close we were in age. But, and that just goes to show you, really. It just goes to tell you that black really don't crack. But anyway, the thing that I picked up was this. Stateside, Gulf Coast, coming up, 90s. Sisters weren't outright telling red-skinned men that they disrespected us for this reason or that reason. They weren't doing that. They weren't coming out and saying, actually, I'm going to overanalyze everything you do and scrutinize you and come up with psychological diagnoses based on whether or not you hold the door for me because of your shade, your phenotype. I'm going to profile you. But you can't do that to me. Now, this was not something they could come out and say. Now, I did notice that everything I did was wrong. I picked up on that early until I started fighting. Then I left. Y'all know the story. I moved to Atlanta, started all the way back over. Everything I did was wrong. This time, I was too old to be starting fights with dudes trying to win women's attention and wouldn't want to do that anyway. So that's it. Stuck. Gonna be by myself. Or women of other races. Definitely not African American women. And I didn't know how much of it had to do with shade, but my freshman year, the summer after my freshman year, I went back to visit my hometown, and I told my mother, listen, I know we came up pro-black, you have a reputation in the city for this, but I'm not going to ever approach African American women again. Now, they can approach me, and I'll listen to what they got to say, but if I'm going to approach someone, she ain't going to be African American. That's the end of that. Not doing it. And she shrugged, and she said, well, we'll talk about it. Tell your father. Told Dad. Dad said, you need to tell your mother. I said, yeah, I already told. I told her first because I thought it was going to be worse for her. But when my mother and I talked about it, my mother said, well, son, I don't know how much you need to do this, but the truth is, son, that I do understand to a certain extent. I get it. Because apparently your generation is a lot worse than mine. I would have thought by now you'd have found somebody in college, but it was only your freshman year. Maybe maybe you didn't give it enough time. I don't know. And I told the mom, I don't need to give it much time because I'm looking at my classmates who don't have to give it that much time. That's what I'm looking at. At the end of the day, I'm not hated by them. Women don't want to fight me, but it's not like that per se, although some of them do. The ones that really didn't belong in college did. They probably ain't coming back next year. The issue is that still at the end of the day, they got options I don't have, and there's nothing I did to ruin them. But they weren't, what I'm saying is the sisters weren't coming out and saying, you red or you yellow, and I don't trust you, and I'm going to treat you differently. And even if we do get together, I'm not going to pay as close attention to my hygiene because I don't really care what impression I make on you. They weren't saying this. They just weren't. They were just not. They weren't coming out and saying, you're getting a different treatment based on this. And if I move up professionally or even just I look better as I age, you're done. I could pick up on it subconsciously, but they weren't saying this. In Selector's case, where he is in Trinidad, they came out and said, we don't deal with red men. And what is the difference? Well, you see, like I said, in Nairobi and in Johannesburg, there are more and more women beginning to say, we don't deal with red men, or they're not as manly, and they're just good to take pictures with, but they're not real men. That's what they're beginning to say in these cities. Guess what? As they're beginning to say these things, I'm noticing a pattern. Now, he said they try to personalize it a lot with him. They would try to personalize it. But openly they can come out and say, we don't deal with red men. That sounds similar to the states, except for one thing. There were enough of them that were willing to tell him this to where he heard it again and again and again. In my case, I heard it a few times. I heard it in 1991 once as a speculation, for which I quickly forgot. It was the first time hearing it. It didn't sound right. I heard it again in 2001. Y'all know that story by now. And then I forgot what I heard because 9/11 happened shortly after. So point I'm making is that I rarely heard it. And usually when I did begin to remember this and I started to come out and say, actually, this is what I'm facing, I was told that's not what it is. That's not what that's what I was told. And of course, what I also noticed, and I got this from Light Skin Motivation a lot too, was assumptions about what I was saying, even despite me not saying them. So I would not say that I was entitled to have better options based on my phenotype. I was simply saying that it is the opposite, and therefore I am perfectly justified in stepping out if I choose to. And of course, I got comments like, don't nobody care about your skin and your hair. No, apparently you don't understand what I'm saying. I just told you they do care. But they're not going to come out and say this to me personally. Whereas in his case, they would try to personalize it, but then they would also tell him, so he got mixed reviews. What's the difference? The options. Brothers, I want you to notice this. If you live somewhere where sisters are the only option, they'll come out and tell you this. If you live somewhere where they're not the only option on the menu, they're less likely to tell you this. So what would be their reason? Their reason would be, simply put, what they want to do is turn you into an incel. That's it. In the States, where you're surrounded by women of other races, they want to tell you to keep it black, but then they want to make it seem like you're just never enough personally. When in fact, what it comes down to is, yeah, you may not be enough, but neither are the men they're with. The difference is it just comes down to the phenotype. But they're telling you to keep it black. They're telling you to do this, but then when you step up and you were insufficiently black, to them, they have to personalize it, because if they come out and they tell you right off the bat, no, you know what, I'm not going to treat you the same way I'm going to treat this other guy over here. He's less ambiguous. They know if they tell you that, what's going to happen is that you're going to realize they just gave you a license to step out. J Cash, exactly what you should be doing, and I hope you do soon. Step out. Find someone of another race, preferably not white, because they started this stuff, to be honest, but that's another story. But if you live somewhere and almost all of them, only sisters, and they get wind of this disdain for yellow-skinned men or red men, then they feel comfortable coming out and saying it, because they can push you away more brazenly, because as far as they can see, you don't have somewhere else to go. That's the difference. They want you to be by yourself. They think that somehow they're going to get rid of light-skinned men from the community, failing to understand that they're going to be conceiving them, even if they don't swirl, because that's how our DNA works. But the point I'm making is that they want you to be an incel. You are being more disrespected than what you realize. And I'm saying this as a man that doesn't even hate sisters. I look at African-American women, I look at black women worldwide as victims of trauma, to be honest with you. But what they're doing is they're pretty much saying, we don't want you to be with anybody. And we don't want you to choose to be by yourself. We want you to be stuck by yourselves. What they want is a situation in which they can look at a man and tell by his complexion if they're justified in making fun of him for jacking off. Now, that's a very crude and blunt way to say it, but I'm coming to realize that's what a lot of them are looking for. And I'm talking about the ones that have the bias. Now, the ones that don't have such a bias anyway, of course, are not part of that program. But they do get silenced. Now, that's something that is common, whether it's the States, Canada, the UK, or Trinidad. I know that. They're going to be silenced. It's the same thing even in South Africa, at least in the parts where it's okay to have a disdain for light-skinned men. They get silenced. Definitely. So I just want to point that out. I want y'all to understand that that's what's going on. There is truly a bias. Now, the hypocrisy behind it is that the people who started this, because remember, black folks didn't get colorism from ourselves. We got it from the outside, specifically from Europeans, Western Europeans. Remember that, okay? I want y'all to never forget that. Despite that fact, they have a disdain, many have a disdain for paler skinned black men than they will ever have for the man that started it and is sitting back from inherited wealth that they gained from our exploitation. I now understand why some brothers say these are not our women. To the ones that don't have a bias, my hat goes off to you for your fairness and neutrality. You are not the ones I'm pointing the fingers at. I don't blame the guilty. However, I had to point out what's going on with those who are biased and how wrong they are and what they're really planning. And I'm not required to apologize for it. And I'm not required to look inward and try to, fix myself or something or tell any other man to do that when that's not what the issue is. These are good things to tell to any person, woman or man, for any reason. I mean, just for general self-improvement, because we're supposed to be the best versions of ourselves, but that's not what's going on here. The failure to do that is not what is causing certain men of our race to be told how invaluable they are and how worthless they are. Liberation does come down to more than just where you stick your dingling. But by the same token, liberation is not going to come to a group of people whose women say to the men, limit yourselves to us, but we're going to go over here with the oppressor, not even with the neutral party, but over here with the oppressor. We own your genitals. It's not going to come to a group of people like that. It's just not. Because you can't afford to put male genitalia at the mercy of ladies' emotions, especially immature, childish ladies. I think y'all get the message. Thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power just because they don't like it.